The man sat quietly inside his old car, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes watching the world move past the windshield. The car was nothing special. Its paint was faded, the seats showed signs of age, and the engine made a soft rattling sound when it was turned off. Anyone walking by would assume the car belonged to an average person trying to get through another long day. No one would ever imagine that the man inside was a billionaire. He liked it this way. Silence gave him peace. Sitting in the car allowed him to pause before stepping back into a world that constantly expected things from him. He did not check his phone. He did not rush. He simply breathed and watched people pass by, each carrying their own worries, hopes, and small moments of joy. Years ago, his life looked very different. He had not been born rich. He grew up in a small home where money was always short and choices were limited. As a young boy, he learned early how to wait, how to observe, and how to remain calm when things felt uncertain. Those lessons stayed with him long after success found him. His journey to wealth was slow and painful. There were nights when he slept on hard floors, days when he skipped meals, and moments when people laughed at his ideas. Many told him he was dreaming too big. Many said he would never succeed. Instead of arguing, he listened. Instead of quitting, he worked harder. Even after success arrived, he did not change much. He still wore simple clothes. He still ate basic food. He still preferred quiet places over loud rooms filled with attention. Money solved many problems, but it never replaced his values. He believed that comfort did not come from luxury, but from peace of mind. That afternoon, the city felt restless. Cars moved slowly, horns echoed in the distance, and people hurried along the sidewalk with serious faces. Some talked loudly on their phones. Others stared down at screens, lost in their own worlds. A street vendor stood nearby, calling out prices to anyone willing to listen. The man noticed everything. He always did. He noticed the tired woman dragging a heavy bag behind her. He noticed the young man pacing back and forth, clearly anxious about something. He noticed the security guard across the street who looked bored but alert. These small details mattered to him more than numbers on a screen. He had parked there for a reason. This spot held memories. Years ago, he had stood on this same street with empty pockets and big dreams. He remembered the fear he felt back then, the hunger and the doubt. Sitting there now reminded him where he came from, why he chose to remain humble. His phone buzzed quietly on the seat beside him. He glanced at it but did not pick it up. The message could wait. He had spent most of his life running from one responsibility to another. Now, he allowed himself moments of stillness. Those moments helped him stay grounded. Outside, a group of people walked past his car without a second look. To them, he was just another driver waiting for traffic to clear or killing time. No one knocked on his window. No one asked for help. No one knew who he was. That was exactly how he liked it. The man leaned back slightly and closed his eyes for a few seconds. He thought about how strange life could be. One day you are invisible, and the next day the world knows your name. He had experienced both sides, and he preferred the first. A soft breeze moved through the street, carrying dust and distant sounds. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. The sound made him smile. Simple moments like that reminded him that happiness did not need to be expensive. He opened his eyes again and looked ahead. Time seemed to slow. His calm expression hid a sharp mind that never stopped thinking. He believed that life often changed without warning, not with loud signs, but with quiet moments that seemed ordinary at first. He had learned this lesson the hard way. In his past, one small decision had changed everything. A chance meeting. A single risk. A moment when he chose courage over fear. Those memories made him respect even the smallest moments, because he knew how powerful they could be. As he sat there, something felt different in the air. He could not explain it, but his instincts, sharpened by years of struggle and success, sensed a shift. Still, he remained calm. Panic never solved anything. The traffic light ahead turned red, and cars slowly came to a stop. People grew impatient. Some drivers leaned on their horns. Others checked their watches. The man simply waited. Waiting had never scared him. He adjusted the mirror and caught his own reflection. His face showed age and experience. There were lines around his eyes, signs of both stress and wisdom. He had earned every one of them. He thought about how many people believed money made life easy. They never saw the sacrifices, the loneliness, or the pressure that came with success. They never knew how heavy responsibility could feel. That was another reason he chose to live quietly. The man placed his hand on the door handle, but did not open it. He had nowhere urgent to be. For now, this car was his safe space. A place where the world could not demand anything from him. Outside, voices grew louder. A small crowd began to form a short distance away. The man noticed the movement through the corner of his eye. He watched carefully, but did not react. Experience taught him to observe before acting. People pointed. Some looked worried. Others looked curious. Something was about to happen, though most did not realize it yet. The man remained seated, calm and focused, unaware that the next few seconds would change everything at that moment. He was still just a quiet man in an old car, unnoticed by the world. But life was already preparing to remind everyone that true power often sits in silence. Waiting for the right moment to reveal itself, the man sat quietly inside his old car, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes watching the world move past the windshield. The car was nothing special. Its paint was faded, the seats showed signs of age, and the engine made a soft rattling sound when it was turned off. Anyone walking by would assume the car belonged to an average person trying to get through another long day. No one would ever imagine that the man inside was a billionaire. He liked it this way. Silence gave him peace. Sitting in the car allowed him to pause before stepping back into a world that constantly expected things from him. He did not check his phone. He did not rush. He simply breathed and watched people pass by, each carrying their own worries, hopes, and small moments of joy. Years ago, his life looked very different. He had not been born rich. He grew up in a small home where money was always short and choices were limited. As a young boy, he learned early how to wait, how to observe, and how to remain calm when things felt uncertain. Those lessons stayed with him long after success found him. His journey to wealth was slow and painful. There were nights when he slept on hard floors, days when he skipped meals, and moments when people laughed at his ideas. Many told him he was dreaming too big. Many said he would never succeed. Instead of arguing, he listened. Instead of quitting, he worked harder. Even after success arrived, he did not change much. He still wore simple clothes. He still ate basic food. He still preferred quiet places over loud rooms filled with attention. Money solved many problems, but it never replaced his values. He believed that comfort did not come from luxury, but from peace of mind. That afternoon, the city felt restless. Cars moved slowly, horns echoed in the distance, and people hurried along the sidewalk with serious faces. Some talked loudly on their phones. Others stared down at screens, lost in their own worlds. A street vendor stood nearby, calling out prices to anyone willing to listen. The man noticed everything. He always did. He noticed the tired woman dragging a heavy bag behind her. He noticed the young man pacing back and forth, clearly anxious about something. He noticed the security guard across the street who looked bored but alert. These small details mattered to him more than numbers on a screen. He had parked there for a reason. This spot held memories. Years ago, he had stood on this same street with empty pockets and big dreams. He remembered the fear he felt back then, the hunger and the doubt. Sitting there now reminded him where he came from, why he chose to remain humble. His phone buzzed quietly on the seat beside him. He glanced at it but did not pick it up. The message could wait. He had spent most of his life running from one responsibility to another. Now, he allowed himself moments of stillness. Those moments helped him stay grounded. Outside, a group of people walked past his car without a second look. To them, he was just another driver waiting for traffic to clear or killing time. No one knocked on his window. No one asked for help. No one knew who he was. That was exactly how he liked it. The man leaned back slightly and closed his eyes for a few seconds. He thought about how strange life could be. One day you are invisible, and the next day the world knows your name. He had experienced both sides, and he preferred the first. A soft breeze moved through the street, carrying dust and distant sounds. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. The sound made him smile. Simple moments like that reminded him that happiness did not need to be expensive. He opened his eyes again and looked ahead. Time seemed to slow. His calm expression hit a sharp mind that never stopped thinking. He believed that life often changed without warning, not with loud signs, but with quiet moments that seemed ordinary at first. He had learned this lesson the hard way. In his past, one small decision had changed everything. A chance meeting, a single risk, a moment when he chose courage over fear. Those memories made him respect even the smallest moments, because he knew how powerful they could be. As he sat there, something felt different in the air. He could not explain it, but his instincts, sharpened by years of struggle and success, sensed a shift. Still, he remained calm. Panic never solved anything. The traffic light ahead turned red, and cars slowly came to a stop. People grew impatient. Some drivers leaned on their horns. Others checked their watches. The man simply waited. Waiting had never scared him. He adjusted the mirror and caught his own reflection. His face showed age and experience. There were lines around his eyes, signs of both stress and wisdom. He had earned every one of them. He thought about how many people believed money made life easy. They never saw the sacrifices, the loneliness, or the pressure that came with success. They never knew how heavy responsibility could feel. That was another reason he chose to live quietly. The man placed his hand on the door handle but did not open it. He had nowhere urgent to be. For now, this car was his safe space, a place where the world could not demand anything from him. Outside, voices grew louder. A small crowd began to form a short distance away. The man noticed the movement through the corner of his eye. He watched carefully, but did not react. Experience taught him to observe before acting. People pointed. Some looked worried. Others looked curious. Something was about to happen, though most did not realize it yet. The man remained seated, calm, and focused. Unaware that the next few seconds would change everything, at that moment, was still just a quiet man in an old car, unnoticed by the world. But life was already preparing to remind everyone that true power often sits in silence, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I've written part 1 as a separate document in the canvas. Following all your instructions, around 2,000 words, no headings, inside the story. Simple. Natural, engagement-centric, and realistic tone third. Person storytelling, no band names, safe for YouTube policy designed. To keep the audience curious and emotionally engaged when you're ready, just say write part 2, and I'll continue the story with the same tone and quality. Building tension toward the big change. Write part 2 in 2,000 words without heading. In simple English words in a separate document, it should be interesting. And every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. Also keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI generated. Also don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. Also don't use names like Marcus, Sarah, Emma, Jamal, etc. Part 2. The unexpected moment. The quiet calm of the street changed in an instant. From where the man sat in his car, he noticed a sudden commotion a few steps away. A young woman stumbled on the sidewalk, almost dropping the bag she was carrying. It was not unusual to see someone trip or fumble, but the way the people around her reacted caught his attention. Some walked past without helping. Some glanced briefly and shrugged, then continued on. The rush of life made people blind to the small struggles around them. The woman regained her balance. But then something else happened. A child ran into the street, chasing after a small ball that had rolled away. A car was coming too fast, and the driver did not slow down. A sharp scream rose from a few bystanders. Time seemed to slow in the man's mind. He felt the familiar surge of alertness that had saved him many times in life. Without thinking, he opened his car door and stepped onto the sidewalk. People were frozen. No one moved. They were either too scared or too uncertain. The young woman looked at him, confusion and fear mixing in her eyes. The child was halfway across the road, the ball rolling toward the curb. The car was still coming. Every second felt stretched. and the man knew that hesitation could cost someone dearly. He ran without panic. His movements were precise and controlled, the result of years of practice in handling tense situations. He reached the child and scooped him up just as the car screeched to a halt inches away. The tires left dark marks on the asphalt. People gasped. Some covered their mouths. The young woman ran to the man, her voice trembling, thanking him in words that almost sounded like tears. He handed the child back to her with a gentle smile. The child clung to his mother, looking up at the man with wide, innocent eyes. The mother held her child close, still shaken. Around them, people started murmuring, some whispering about how quickly the man had reacted. A few looked at him curiously, noticing the calm confidence in his stance. The man did not respond to the murmurs. He did not want attention. His heart was steady, but he noticed the tension in the street slowly easing. The drivers and passers-by resumed their movement. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the moment lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. He took a deep breath and stepped back to the side, letting the woman and child recover. She kept glancing at him, almost searching for something she could not name. The child tugged at her sleeve, pointing toward the man as if he were a hero from a storybook. The man smiled softly, shook his head slightly, and returned to his car. As he settled back into his seat, he thought about the small acts of courage that defined life. It was never about recognition. It was never about wealth. It was about knowing when to act, when to remain calm, and how to make a difference in a moment that mattered. He did not feel pride or arrogance. He felt a quiet sense of purpose, the kind that had guided him through years of challenges and success. Across the street, a few people had started talking among themselves, recounting the events. Some were impressed, some were relieved, and some were curious. They still did not know who he was. To them, he was just a man who acted without hesitation. But that was enough. For him, that was all that mattered. A soft breeze moved past, rustling the leaves in the nearby trees. The noise of the street resumed, cars honking, people walking, vendors shouting prices. It was as if nothing had happened. Yet, in the minds of those who saw him, something had changed. In the ordinary chaos of a busy street, they had seen someone who chose action over fear. Someone who did not wait for others to lead. The man sat quietly again, observing the world from behind the wheel. He noticed the way the young woman held her child close, glancing back at him once more. He noticed the small crowd slowly dispersing, whispers fading into the normal sounds of the city. And he noticed something else, a subtle change in the air. People's eyes lingered on him a little longer, curiosity mixed with respect. He did not allow himself to be distracted. He knew that recognition could complicate things. He knew that wealth could draw attention away from the small, real moments that mattered most. But he also knew that actions, even in silence, could speak louder than words. He had always believed that the right action at the right time could change everything. For the next few minutes, he watched the street continue its rhythm. People hurried past, unaware that they had witnessed something remarkable. He allowed himself to feel a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing that, in a small way, he had made life safer, better. If only for a few moments. His mind wandered to the years of preparation that had led him here. The discipline, the calmness, the ability to see clearly when others panic. These were not gifts from money or luck. They were lessons learned from a life that demanded persistence, courage, and humility. Every difficult experience, every failure, every lonely night had shaped the ability to act when it counted most. He glanced at the young woman again. She had regained some composure, but still seemed shaken. He considered speaking, giving her reassurance, but decided against it. Words were unnecessary. The memory of what had just happened would remain with her. The lessons of courage and quick thinking were already written into the experience itself. The child clutched a small toy he had dropped earlier. His mother smiled at him, relief written across her face. A few pedestrians stopped briefly to check if everything was all right. Some nodded silently at the man, a small gesture of gratitude. He nodded back politely, acknowledging their respect without drawing attention. He thought about how quickly life could shift in a matter of seconds. A moment of distraction, A moment of fear, a moment of hesitation could change everything. And yet, a moment of courage, of calm action, could also transform the world around him. That was the essence of life, he realized. The balance between ordinary moments and extraordinary reactions as the street slowly returned to its usual pace. He reflected on the power of silence and observation. Sitting quietly watching the world allowed him to see things others missed. It allowed him to respond with precision and care. In that small window of time, he had made a difference. But he knew that the true impact would only reveal itself later, in ways he could not yet see. The man settled back into the seat fully, closing his eyes briefly. He did not need praise, applause, or acknowledgement. The quiet of the car, the normal sounds of the city, the relief in the young woman's eyes, and the safe return of the child were enough. These small, unnoticed victories were far more valuable than any public recognition. Minutes passed. People dispersed. The city moved on, carrying the memory of the moment in subtle ways. The man stayed calm, observing the life around him. He understood that extraordinary things often happen quietly. Without fanfare, and without the world ever knowing the full story, he reached for the steering wheel again, ready to continue his journey. He knew that life would present more moments like this, more opportunities to act when others hesitated. And he was ready, as he had always been, to respond with calm, courage, and purpose. The ordinary afternoon had turned into a moment of quiet heroism, a reminder that even in the most ordinary spaces, actions could ripple through the lives of others in ways that mattered far more than money, fame, or recognition. The calm he had regained after the incident did not last long. From his seat in the car, he noticed a new situation unfolding, one that demanded more than quiet observation. A small group of people had gathered near the street corner, their voices rising, their gestures anxious. Two men were arguing loudly, one pointing aggressively, the other stepping back, fists clenched. The tension was visible, the kind of tension that could explode in a heartbeat. The man in the car watched carefully. He had learned long ago that when emotions escalate, chaos follows quickly. He stayed still for a moment, analyzing the scene. The two men seemed ready to fight, and the crowd surrounding them was too small to intervene. People were unsure of what to do. Some whispered, some filmed the moment on their phones, but no one acted. Panic, curiosity, and hesitation mixed into one. Frozen tableau, he knew that stepping in would make a difference, but he also understood the delicate balance required. A wrong word, a sudden gesture, and the situation could worsen. Yet doing nothing was not an option. He took a slow, deliberate breath and opened the car door. His presence, calm but firm, immediately caught the attention of the arguing men. The crowd, sensing a shift, stepped back slightly. He walked toward the men with measured steps. His body language was relaxed, his voice steady, as though he carried no fear. "Stop for a moment," he said simply. The words were quiet but commanded attention. The arguing men turned, surprised. No one had spoken to them that way. They paused, just enough for him to take the next step. He positioned himself between them. A human barrier that was calm but unyielding. "I know you're angry," he continued, "but fighting won't solve anything. There's a better way to handle this." He spoke plainly, without judgment, without showing superiority. His voice carried authority not because of status, because of confidence rooted in clarity and experience. The crowd was silent. All eyes were on him. The tension hung in the air, thick and heavy. Yet something about his calm demeanor caused the men to hesitate. Anger, as volatile as it was, began to waver. The man could see their breathing slow, their fists unclenched slightly. The energy in the group shifted subtly, from fear and aggression to uncertainty. He stepped closer, maintaining a safe distance, hands relaxed by his side. "Look around you," he said softly. "Is this really what you want? To cause pain, regret, and maybe more trouble than you can handle?" The crowd murmured. Some nodded quietly. Others watched, uncertain, but the message was clear. There was a chance to resolve the conflict without violence, and the man had created that opening. The older of the two arguing men shook his head, frustration still evident. "He started it," he said, voice tight. "He may have," the man replied calmly. "But that doesn't mean you have to continue it. You're bigger than the moment, bigger than this fight." The younger man hesitated. His hands, previously clenched, loosened slightly. The words were sinking in. There was no judgment, no insult, only reason. The bystanders began to sense that the situation might end peacefully, and their relief was palpable. The man then turned his attention to the crowd. "You all are watching," he said. "Do you want to be witnesses to something that could ruin lives? Or do you want to remember a moment when reason overcame anger?" The words hit a nerve. Some nodded, some whispered encouragement. The crowd's energy shifted further, creating pressure toward calm rather than escalation. He watched the two men carefully, ready to intervene physically if necessary, but hoping it would not come to that. Slowly, the older man lowered his hands. The younger man's shoulders relaxed. The tension did not disappear entirely, but the threat of violence had passed. A few murmured thanks to the man, but he barely acknowledged them. His focus remained on ensuring the situation did not reignite. "Talk," he said. "Explain, listen. That's the only way forward." For several long minutes, the two men exchanged words in a quieter, less aggressive tone. The man stayed close, ready to intervene if needed, but allowing them the space to resolve the issue themselves. This was the most important part, giving them control while guiding them toward calm. He noticed something else. A few people in the crowd were taking out their phones, recording. Normally, he would avoid attention, but he understood that today, being seen could have consequences. His actions, recorded by strangers, could teach lessons beyond this street corner. He did not think of fame or recognition. He thought of influence, the quiet kind that mattered. Eventually, two men turned away from each other, their voices no longer sharp. The crowd began to disperse, relief visible on the faces of those who had watched in fear. The street returned to its usual rhythm, though the memory of the tense moment lingered for everyone present. The man returned to his car, hands on the steering wheel once more, breathing slowly. He did not feel pride, but he did feel the quiet satisfaction of having made a difference. He knew that in life, moments like these could ripple outward in ways invisible to the naked eye. As he sat, he reflected on how quickly life could demand decisions. One second, the world moves along as usual. The next, an unexpected challenge appears, testing courage, patience, and wisdom. The difference between chaos and calm often came down to a single person willing to act with reason rather than emotion. His mind wandered to the years of preparation that had shaped his instincts. He thought of the lessons learned in hard times, the moments of failure that taught him patience, and the small victories that built confidence. Each experience had prepared him for this precise moment. When action and calm had to coexist, he glanced around the street, noticing how life resumed its rhythm. Children ran along the sidewalk. A vendor called out prices. Cars moved slowly through the intersection. The city carried on, unaware of the quiet intervention that had prevented a possible tragedy. That was how he preferred it. True influence often went unnoticed, yet he knew this was only the beginning. Life rarely presented challenges in isolation. Moments like this were interconnected. The decisions made here, the calm maintained, and the lessons imparted would echo in ways that could not be predicted. He understood that responsibility came in quiet packages, disguised as ordinary street corners, ordinary people, ordinary moments. For the next few minutes, he sat in silence, allowing the city's sounds to fill the space. He felt no rush to move. Patience was a skill he valued above all else. He believed that understanding the environment, observing details, and remaining composed could prevent far more chaos than any physical intervention could. A passerby gave him a brief, appreciative nod. Another whispered something under their breath, admiration clear in tone. The man acknowledged them with a small nod, letting his actions speak louder than any words. Recognition was not the goal, but seeing that his calm had impacted even one person reinforced his belief in the quiet power of measured action. The afternoon sunlight shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the street. The man watched the interplay of light and movement, a reminder that the world never truly stopped. Life flowed continuously, bringing challenges, opportunities, and moments of choice. And each moment demanded awareness, patience, and courage. As he settled back in, he realized that being ready to act did not require constant tension. It required balance. A calm mind paired with readiness, quiet observation paired with swift decisiveness. That balance had allowed him to step in today, and it would allow him to step in again whenever life demanded it. He adjusted his seat slightly, hands on the wheel, eyes scanning the street once more. In that quiet moment, he understood a deeper truth. The smallest decisions, taken with clarity and care, could change lives in seconds. A glance, a word, a gesture, an act of courage, these were the real measures of influence. As the street gradually returned to normal, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. Every experience, every challenge, every risk had prepared him for this life of quiet intervention. And though the world might never know who he was or why he acted, he understood that meaningful action never required applause or recognition. The impact itself, silent and profound, was enough. The man sat in his car, breathing slowly, letting the calm return after the tense moments on the street, but the peace was fleeting. Across the way, a few people were talking, their voices carrying toward him. He could tell that something had changed in the air, a shift he could feel even from behind the wheel. People were no longer just curious. There was a sense of recognition, of something being understood. A young man approached the car, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. He tapped lightly on the window. The man rolled it down just enough to hear him. "Excuse me," the young man said, voice tinged with excitement. Do you realize who you are?" The man looked at him calmly, expression unreadable. "I know who I am," he replied quietly. "But does it matter right now?" The young man hesitated, unsure how to respond. His eyes darted toward the crowd who were beginning to gather again. Some whispered to each other, pointing, murmuring in disbelief. It was clear that recognition was spreading. Rumors and fragments of information traveled fast in a crowd, and the man realized that today, his quiet presence was drawing attention in a way he had not anticipated. A woman from the earlier incident with the child stepped forward. "Are you? Really you?" she asked, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. She glanced around nervously, making sure her words did not carry judgment, but curiosity. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said simply. No boast, no arrogance, just the plain truth. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Eyes widened, whispers grew louder, and phones were raised to capture the moment. People who had only seen a calm man act with courage were now realizing that this was not just an ordinary stranger. This was someone they had only seen in the news, someone they had admired from a distance. A middle-aged man stepped closer, disbelief in his eyes. "But why? Why are you here, like this, in an old car, quietly watching?" The man smiled faintly. "Because this is where life happens," he said. "Not in the skyscrapers, not in the offices, not in headlines. Life is here, in these streets, in these moments, with real people making real choices." The crowd was silent again, processing the words, the meaning. He could see the surprise and admiration in their expressions. Some were shocked that someone of such immense wealth could choose to live quietly, to intervene without seeking attention. Others were moved, realizing that true courage and influence were not measured by money, but by the way a person acted when it counted. A teenager stepped forward, speaking for the crowd. I thought you were untouchable. I thought people like you didn't notice things like us. But today, you changed everything." The man's eyes softened. "I notice," he said. "I always have, and I always will. But being noticed is not the goal. Understanding, helping, and choosing the right action, that is what matters." The crowd murmured among themselves, slowly nodding in agreement. Some people shared stories of watching him act, remembering how quickly he had responded when the child ran into the street, how carefully he had handled the argument earlier. People began to understand that his calm, his humility, his quick thinking were not accidents. They were part of who he was, a woman holding a phone took a step closer, her curiosity mixing with awe. I need to ask, why didn't you tell anyone who you were? You could have helped so many people more easily, with resources, with influence. He shook his head gently. Help is not always about resources, he said. Sometimes help is about being present, being calm, and choosing to act when it matters. If I had tried to show who I was from the start, the lesson would be lost. Today, the lesson was clear because it came from action, not title. A few people in the crowd began to clap softly, a quiet acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. The clapping was not for fame or recognition, but for the realization that true impact often comes from ordinary actions taken with extraordinary clarity and courage. Phones continued to record, whispers continued to spread, and slowly the truth of who he was sank in. He noticed the young woman with the child from earlier, tears in her eyes, still holding her child close. She stepped forward and said softly, "Thank you for showing me. For showing everyone that it's not about money or fear or waiting for someone else to act. You made me believe in kindness again." The man nodded, his gaze gentle. "Kindness is not complicated," he said. "It is simple. Pay attention, act with care, and do what is right. That is all anyone can do." The crowd started to disperse, some lingering to catch another glimpse, others speaking excitedly to friends nearby. His quiet car was surrounded by people who now knew the truth, who now realized that the man they had seen acting calmly, decisively, and without ego, was the billionaire they had only known from stories. It was a revelation that changed their perspective instantly. The man leaned back in his seat, watching the city carry on. Cars passed, vendors shouted their usual prices, children laughed as they ran past. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm, but it was different now. The memory of what had just happened, of witnessing someone act with courage and humility, lingered. People would carry that lesson forward, in ways he could not yet know. A young man with a camera stepped forward cautiously, lowering it and speaking. I want to thank you, really, seeing you act like that. It makes me want to be better, to act calmly instead of reacting with fear or anger." The man smiled faintly, a quiet approval. "Then carry it forward," he said. "You don't need my approval. You just need the courage to do what is right." Slowly, the crowd thinned, leaving the street quieter once more. He sat in the car, feeling a strange mix of relief and reflection. Recognition had arrived, but it was not overwhelming. It was subtle, respectful, and it affirmed what he had always believed. Influence was not measured by wealth, but by how a person used themselves to impact the world. He thought about the day's events, the child, the argument, the small crowd that had gathered. Every incident had demanded presence, calm, and clarity. Every response had been a choice. And every choice had shown that true power was often invisible, working quietly in the background, guiding outcomes without fanfare. As he finally started the car, ready to move on, he knew that people would remember him differently now. Not as a figure of immense wealth, but as a human who acted with courage, compassion, and humility when it mattered most. That was a truth far more enduring than money, far more meaningful than status, and far more important than any headline. The city carried on, bustling with life, unaware of the quiet transformation that had just taken place. Yet in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it, a lesson had been written. The lesson of courage and stillness, of action without ego, and of truth revealed not by words, by deeds. The street had finally returned to its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. The people who had witnessed the earlier events moved with a quiet sense of awe and respect. They spoke in hushed tones, recounting what they had seen, the calmness, the courage, and the humility of the man who had acted without hesitation. The realization that he was not just any passerby, but the billionaire they had read about in newspapers, created a ripple that would continue long after the afternoon ended. The man remained in his car, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, eyes scanning the street. He did not seek recognition, but he felt the subtle acknowledgement around him. People now looked at him differently, not because of wealth, but because of character. For years, he had believed that influence was measured in quiet actions, and today had confirmed it in the most vivid way. A small group of bystanders approached cautiously. One of them, a young woman who had been watching everything unfold from across the street, stepped forward. "I can't believe it's really you," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I've seen you in the news and stories about your work and your wealth, but seeing you here like this, it's different. It makes me believe that anyone can make a difference if they try." He nodded gently. "Anyone can," he said softly. "It is not about money or power. It is about paying attention, acting with care, and doing what is right, even when no one is watching." A man from the earlier argument came forward, his face showing a mixture of gratitude and lingering tension. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know what to do," he admitted. "And you stepped in. Calm, steady. You didn't judge, you just guided. I never expected that from anyone." The billionaire gave a quiet smile. "You had the power to change the outcome yourself," he said. "I only reminded you of it. Remember that. Every moment gives you a choice, and it is up to you to make the right one." As he spoke, more people began to gather, drawn by curiosity and the whispers spreading quickly through the crowd. Some had recorded videos, others had taken photos. And many were simply witnesses, their expressions a mix of admiration and disbelief. They realized that the man they had seen act with courage and humility was the same person whose name carried wealth and influence across the world. Yet he had never let that define him. A young boy holding the small ball from earlier approached timidly. "Thank you," he said softly, looking up at him with wide eyes. "I didn't know what would happen, but you helped me." The man reached down and placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "You were brave too," he said. "You chased your ball, and that's okay. Sometimes bravery is just taking a step forward, even when you are unsure." The mother of the child smiled, tears in her eyes. "You showed us all something important," she said. "That calm and care can make a bigger difference than shouting or rushing. We will never forget this." The crowd began to disperse slowly, each person carrying with them a story of courage, humility, and quiet influence. The man remained seated for a few more moments, reflecting on the impact of a single afternoon. It was not the wealth or fame that mattered. It was the actions, the choices, the calm presence that left a mark on those around him. As he started the car and drove slowly down the street, he noticed small acts of kindness emerging among the crowd. People helped each other carry bags, reassured frightened children, and spoke with patience rather than irritation. His actions, though quiet and unassuming, had sparked something in the hearts of those who witnessed them. Change, he knew, often began with one person choosing to act differently. He thought back to the years of preparation, the lessons learned in hardship, and the times he had failed. Every experience had contributed to his ability to act with calm precision when it mattered most. Today, that preparation had paid off not for himself, but for the lives he had touched and the lessons he had imparted. Without a single word of self-promotion, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. The city continued its rhythm, unaware of the small transformation that had occurred. But in the minds and hearts of the witnesses, a new understanding had taken root. Courage could be calm, influence could be silent, and true greatness was measured by action, not recognition. A passerby approached him once more, a notebook in hand. "I want to write about what I saw," they said, "but not about your wealth. I want to write about how you acted, how you stayed calm, how you made a difference." He nodded, appreciating the intent. "Write that," he said simply. "Stories like that are worth more than headlines. They inspire people to act with care and courage in their own lives." As he drove away, he glanced back at the street one last time. The memory of the events lingered, not as a story of fame, but as a story of quiet, meaningful impact. People had learned that wealth could never replace character, and that influence was most powerful when it worked silently. Shaping the world through action rather than words, he reflected on the day's lesson. Life often changed in an instant, and ordinary moments could carry extraordinary consequences. A child's safety, a conflict diffused, a lesson quietly taught, These were the true measures of success. And though the world might never fully grasp the impact of his actions, he knew it was enough. The city continued to hum around him, people moving along their routines, unaware of the depth of what had just transpired. Yet, in small ways, the world had shifted. Acts of courage and calm rippled outward, touching hearts, inspiring change. And planting seeds of hope and kindness. He drove through the streets with a sense of fulfillment, not pride. The day had shown that life's most important moments were often quiet, demanding nothing but awareness, courage, and humility. And in those moments, everything could change, not through wealth, status, or recognition, but through the simple, powerful act of choosing to do what is right.